What I was saying just now is that when I was graduating, and it was like Gerald was really going to be doing this, we were his last students, and it was the end, and he was like not. He was speaking a lot better than right after the stroke, but it was like at that plateau where it's like I don't think he's ever going to get better at communicating, and he was struggling to put together, but eventually Robert Best had to like spit it out for him. He goes, "What he's trying to say is that you can go to graduate school if you'd like, but you don't need to because you've already gone. While you were going to undergraduate for acting, he gave you a graduate school program in directing, and now you have both and everything you need to know." And I remember thinking like that's why I love him so much, because it's my perfect combination of just like arrogance and honesty, because he wasn't blowing smoke. He really thinks that, and he might be right.
Right.
And
I mean,
but there's that you got to have arrogance to say something like that, for sure, to be like, don't worry, our school's so badass, you got 2 degrees while you're here, and meanwhile I got an arts diploma, I have no degrees, so I don't know how much of fucking that's true at all.
Well, I mean, but especially in the arts world, it's the training you get. The degree does not mean
no one's asked and nobody cares.
Yeah, exactly.
For me personally, I'm sure other people who have more academic pursuits are probably, dealing with that. People who want to like teach or I don't know, be involved with more institutionalized jobs, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, in the freelance art world, nobody cares.
Some of my dancer friends have had to go back and get a higher degree just to teach dance at a collegiate level. And it's like, they're incredible dancers. They could absolutely do it. But it's like, you want to get hired to college, you have to go get your like master's in something.
There's an old legend about somebody at school, and I don't even want to tell it, but it was basically I'm going to tell a short, bad version that someone can go look up, maybe the full version of this. But it's like they were going through that at School of the Arts in the like 90s, when they were becoming more of a accredited, getting the bachelor's program and all that stuff. And UNC was starting to get involved. And they were starting to go through some of the faculty and be like, whoa, where are the college degrees on some of these people who teach here? And of course, they're the most revered teachers that they have are the ones that don't have a college degree or don't have a master's degree or whatever it is, or maybe nothing. And then there's some story about a dance teacher who like went to their office and got out like 5 issues of like Time magazine they were on the cover of as a dancer, and were like, these are my fucking credentials. Like it was like, they don't want to learn from someone who went to college, they want to learn from someone who fucking made a career out of being a dancer, which is the reason I went there. Okay, so we're going to get to that in a second. First of all, thank you for doing this, and I can't believe that you've never done this before.
Yeah, we tested your equipment years ago, but we never actually did the thing.
Yeah. So and anyone who's listening, there are these, maybe I'll put this out there, and one of the like 9 fans of this show will be like, that's so cool. One day there are some vault episodes of this show that were recorded and never ever released for all sorts of different reasons. And they're all kind of in the first year. Some of them were because I was testing out equipment, and later when I listened to the audio, it was bad and I didn't know how to fix it. Or there's a couple episodes that people legit were like, don't put mine out. Never mind. I changed my mind. I just like, don't want anyone to hear that conversation. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to delete them either. Right. So, cause you never know what's going to happen. And then maybe later they're like, oh yeah, why did I care about that? And then I can publish it. So we'll see. But some of them, and you're one of them, is just, I listened to the quality back and I was like, this doesn't sound the way I want it to sound when I put it out. And then I ended up building the studio for At the Elephants, the first one, under my under my loft bed that you gave me. When I first moved to New York in 2014 after I graduated. And so, yeah, it's just never seen the light of day. And I haven't listened to it. I was just telling you before we were recording that I'm going to go back and listen to it and see like what's on it. Maybe there's some like at least clippable. And now I know a lot more about cleaning and editing, and maybe I can make it listenable and put out some vault episodes of it. Who the hell knows?
I feel like I used to like cringe listening to my younger self. But like, I don't know, maybe personal growth and therapy and stuff. Now I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. Oh man, there's so much shit he didn't know.
I feel like it's, I think of when I encounter my younger self like that, I think of it like a younger sibling, of which I never had any. You have one.
Yeah.
But like, it's like, I just see him, I'm like, oh yeah, he's got so far to go. Like, kind of when I look at my nephews, I'm like, that's adorable.
Totally. But there's also the part of it's like, man, kind of miss being wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. That was cool, like in its own way. I wish I could reclaim a little of that while still having all the shit that I know right now. You know?
Right. I had a recent one. I'll share this with you before we get started with my first question, which is the only question on this show. But this is something that happened to me recently, and I was really scared. And I kind of conquered a fear, and then I felt really cool about myself for like 2 seconds, and then it fell apart. And what it was is, when I first moved to LA, I started working on a TV show, and I worked on the same TV show for months and months. And I worked at the production company. I worked in the field. I was like working all over this show for many months. And then because I was bored and I was listening to like a lot of Lil Dicky and Macklemore in particular, I was like, I'm going to write a rap song about everybody who works on the show. I'm going to make a list of people, and then I'm going to try to work them all into a rap. Like when we were like in middle school and we would try to write song parodies and stuff, I was like, I'm going to get back into my like writing shit. And I was like, maybe this will be the beginning of me rapping.
Believe me, I've had the same delusions of grandeur. That's great.
I wrote one song, and I found a way to work in like everybody. And I like made my own beat in like GarageBand, and I like recorded it in my bedroom. This was like in 2016. And this is not that long ago. And then I recently re-listened to it. I saw it in my iTunes. I was like, oh no. I was like, this is when I see myself do comedy or like plays and stuff like that, and I see pictures of it later, or I watch it or videos and stuff like that, I usually am not like, oh my God, it's terrible. When I do experimental stuff, like write a song or do a rap, I'm like, oh no, this is going to be hard to encounter.
Well, like Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, she talks a lot about like when you're taking those first baby steps on creativity and like a new thing, don't show them to people. Those are not meant to be seen. Like, not because you're not talented, but because when you first do a thing, it's not going to be very good, most likely, unless you're some crazy insane prodigy, and you're doing yourself a huge disservice by expecting it to. Like, if you want to start writing rap songs, cool. Don't show anybody the first like 7. Like maybe by number 8, or I guess 7's the magic number or something. Maybe by number 7, you could be like, this might be pretty cool. You want to listen?
But that's the thing that makes, and this was the same thing I was starting at the same time. That was that's the tough thing about stand-up comedy, because you can't practice it without showing it to people. So the first jokes you write are just, they're not doing stand-up. If you just write jokes, you're a joke writer, which is also its own thing and fine. But if you want to do stand-up, you have to get up and tell those jokes in front of people when they're not good. It's the only art form that requires that you do that.
But you also don't put those videos on your Instagram. You know what I mean? Like there's also the next level of like,
some people do.
Well, they shouldn't.
No, they shouldn't. There's too much of it.
No, you go and, was it Jon Stewart talked about how like, he's like, where did I learn comedy? Performing for drunk like Ukrainians in New York City at like 3 a.m. or, drunk foreigners at 3 a.m. in New York City, like doing the whatever stand up you could get in front of. And the shitty thing about that is that, like exactly what you said, you can't practice it without doing it. But at the same time, nobody remembers, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Almost everyone else at your level when you're there is doing the exact same thing. And so that's one of the things that makes it work.
Yeah. Like I can't, like, if you ask me, like, tell me about a stand-up comic who bombed like so badly, I barely have any memories. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know.
Like one of the biggest clubs. Yeah.
I bartended at the Comedy Cellar. For a while. Now, mind you, nobody bombed at the Cellar, because like if you're at the Cellar, you've rehearsed your act a lot. I worked there back in 2012, back when there was like Amy Schumer and Aziz Ansari and Anthony Jeselnik and like David Tell, and it was awesome for getting to listen to the comics, and that's why I wanted the job. I was a pretty new bartender at the time, and I was not good enough for that. That was a hard bartending job.
Oh yeah. If anyone's never
really
been
hard,
if you're listening to this, you've never been to I would say I was about to say like main city or something. I'm just going to say directly. Have you never been to a comedy club in New York or LA? Comedy clubs in the middle of the city come in, or in the middle of the country come in all different shapes and sizes. But the ones that are right there in the heart of the two centers of comedy are very specifically designed. They're all a little bit different, but they are packed so tight. And there are so many people, and the comics on stage are very likely to have also depending on how well their set's going, very little patience for you not being an assassin at being a waiter. You need to be in and out, service everybody, make no noise, don't trip. You have to be very, very, very good, or the show's going to be about you in a not fun way.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
And they seat the whole room. Right. They have a 2-item minimum, which is usually 2 drinks. Like every person has to order like 2 drinks or whatever, and you have to get them out as soon as possible. So it's not like a normal bartending job where you kind of have the flow of the night. It's like you're seated, and then because you're just a service bartender, right? You're in this little fucking drink booth, and then all of a sudden, 85 drink tickets come out in the space of like 0, like so fast, and including like frozen margaritas and shit.
Right.
And I think I could absolutely, I was a bartender for 10 years in New York City, and I could do it now. I had been a bartender for 9 months when I got that job, and I held my own. I didn't get fired, but I was like, this is too fucking hard. And the thing, I also discovered that a lot of those waiters and just that world, at least the cellar, there's a lot of alcoholism and negativity, like fucking negative motherfuckers who are smart and kind of mean. And I was like, the money is not great. It's really hard. It's a bunch of really negative people that are like kind of mean or really mean.
It's like really that guy it's that guy in high school who was like a bully, but he made everybody laugh when he was mean to everybody. And you kind of wanted to be his friend. Yeah. But then if you ever spent time alone with him, you were like, you're kind of a hollow dude who's like that guy you were in chemistry class is like, that's all you got. Yeah. Because you get behind it and it's like, that's all an action. And now if you go into the comedy world, everybody is that guy.
Yeah.
It's like almost everybody you encounter is either that or they're that weird transient dude who lives behind the gym in a tent. Yeah. Those are the 2 guys in comedy.
And the thing is, in New York, at least, there's the 2 comedy worlds. There's the stand-up world and the improv world. And they overlap
so different
for sure. But you want to talk about difference in like attitude and vibe. Like some people do both. Absolutely. More power to you. But man, like the fucking improv world's like, everything's great. Yes. And like a lot of times things aren't that great. Like it's like come to my improv show. And then the shittier improv shows, you're like, whatever. That was cute.
Meanwhile, when you book a comic, I know what that's like. And you're like, hey, can you try to bring some people to the show? Not even like a bringer show, but like, hey, could you let everyone know the show's happening? They're like, how about you promote the fucking show? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So different worlds. Some people do both, which more power to them, man. But
it's tough, dude. It definitely is super different worlds, and I encounter that in Austin a lot. Which is my segue to kind of, because you're not from Austin, but you are, and we're going to talk about that. You've never been on the show, and I want everyone to know this that you're listening to is the guy that I've mentioned so many times on the show. I've told a number of stories that include Brandon, including how I got to School of the Arts, how I got involved with Comedy Central in New York. I've also told the story of how Brandon found the school, and we may go back over some of these things lightly. But I've wanted so long to have you on the show. And of course, as anyone listening already can tell, we're very capable at talking ad nauseum about just about anything forever. So I'm going to have to be bold, as I never am in our conversations, and attempt to guide it as best I can to at least accomplish a goal. I want you to come back, obviously. And I think there's no reason why you shouldn't be the most frequent guest on this show. We should be checking in like every 2 months and talking about whatever the fuck, because there's so many stories. There's so many things we could do. and maybe we shall. But let's start this episode, or at least after our first commercial break there, into Act 2 of me asking you the only question on At the Elephants, which is, where are you from?
Texas. Split answer is like Lake Jackson, Brazoria, Texas, which is kind of small town south of Houston, kind of Houston area. And then the slash is from Austin. So most of my family is from the Houston area. I spent from age 0 through 10 in Lake Jackson, Texas, Lake Jackson, like Brazoria. And then when I was 10, my mom remarried and moved us to Austin. And
so I really think of your childhood in two parts, right? Because it's got two cities. It's right at when you were 10. Mm-hmm. So that's also like you only did 1 year of elementary school, 5th grade in Austin. And then boom, it was into middle school. So, and it was with a lot of the same people that you went to that elementary school with. So it was, kind of the same thing. It was next door. Yeah. It's like literally
down the street.
Yeah. The two schools. So, all intents and purposes, you kind of did like being a little kid in this first city. And then you did being a prepubescent and teenager in this other city. And I want to break that down because it is so, and I became your friend in the second part. Because that's where I lived. I didn't live in
like in 5th grade, right? When I moved
right off the bat. As soon as you get to part 2, there I am. And then we're best buddies throughout that. So,
but I want to be enemies for like a week or two.
Oh, for sure.
When I tore up your band card, drummer card.
And we drifted apart a little bit in middle school when I found girls. And then we kind of, came back together, and then I moved away. So there's some accordion shit going on here, but generally speaking, thick and thin, we've been best buddies. You're my best man in my wedding. And really my oldest friend maybe my second oldest friend, other than our friend Shane, who we also grew up with. So, I want to talk about part 1. Because I know less about it because I wasn't there for it. Obviously, I know quite a bit because I met you right after you'd come from it. And but I feel like there's still, every time we talk about you growing up in Lake Jackson, I feel like I learned something new that I didn't know about before. And it felt like such a full life. I've talked to a lot of people about what do you remember the first 10 years of your life? That comes up in conversation sometimes. Most people don't have that much. And that was a lot of times just like a little springboard that led them to being a teenager, and all those is kind of this slow flow. But you have this unique story. I moved around a little bit, but you lived in 2 very fucking different places, even for Texas, because your first part is like a river town. You're like much more out in the country. You're doing country people shit. You're hanging out with what we would in Texas even call country people. I mean, at some affluency. You guys aren't broke or anything, but like definitely live that country life. And then you moved to a suburb in a much less conservative place. So you kind of were on this track to be very much a red state fella.
Absolutely.
Not to say anything about what you might have grown up to feel, but you ended up in the suburbs of Austin, which is, of course, this blue pool of progressiveness. We end up getting involved with community theater, and we're hanging out with like gay guys and lesbians and going to cast parties. And like, it's all this stuff that you perchance may never have encountered had you not moved there. How often do you think about that being the case?
All the time. I mean, I often say like Darkest Timeline Brandon is like, a fiery Southern Baptist preacher who like secretly has an affair with a dude on the side behind his wife's back. You know what I mean?
You were like the recipe for that guy, for like a Joel Osteen or something.
I was planning on being
you would be a powerful Joel Osteen type.
Yeah, I know.
Dude. People
tell
would
me that.
Follow you.
I wanted to be a preacher. Right. I wanted to be a Southern Baptist preacher, and that was my plan whenever I was a kid. So from pre-K, so I don't know, where to start. My parents are both pharmacists. My dad owned some pharmacies in Houston and in Lake Jackson. Harris Pharmacy. He had 2 of them whenever I was just born. And my mom and my dad had 3 kids together. And whenever I was really young, they got divorced. And it was a really acrimonious, not good divorce. It was my dad hired a private investigator to watch my mom to make sure she wasn't violating the terms of the divorce. Like, she would tell us that she didn't love us. It was not great.
It was messy. Sometimes they're clean, and my parents kind of were mostly clean, occasionally some bitter thoughts. But, and I want to say this too, just to give people some context, your family structure is so complicated for most people to understand.
Yeah.
And and this was before this divorce. So it's not like everything was a very clean and kind of white picket fence, simple to understand before that, because your dad started with 2 kids from one marriage, right?
Yeah, I can break it down. So
please do.
My dad had 2 kids when he was in his early 20s. And then, in his 40s, then they would go on to get divorced, and she unfortunately passed away. And then in his 40s, in his late 30s, he got remarried to my mom. In his 40s, he had 3 more kids. So I was born when my dad was 46.
And you're the third of those 3 kids.
Third of those 3 kids. Right. And then my mom and my dad split up.
The divorce you just mentioned.
And then my mom got remarried to another guy named Tommy, his farmer. And she had my younger half brother Aaron with them. And so, when I met you, let's put the cap on it. When I met you, your mom is married to a guy named Tom. Different
Tom. Who is not Tommy, the guy from the Aaron's dad story. Correct. Not the farmer.
No, yeah. She and the farmer, Tommy, split up. Good guy. He would take us fishing. Still really care about him. But then she re-met Tom, who was a cop and lived in Austin, and she got remarried and moved us to Austin. And then Tiffany was like, "This sucks. I hate this. I miss all my friends in Lake Jackson." And she
is the oldest of the 3 middle kids.
Yeah. And she moved back with my dad in Lake Jackson after like a year.
So overall, you've got 6 kids from 2 moms and 3 dads.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
Right?
No, 2 dads. 2 dads. 2 dads, 2 moms.
Yeah, I caught it.
2 dads, 2 moms. I'm like, this is my own family.
Right. Dude, that's what I'm saying.
Because there's another stepdad in there who didn't have any kids.
Right.
Tom.
Exactly.
So
that's why I got thrown off
the count.
So when I met you, I remember thinking my life was complicated because my parents split up and my mom married a Mexican guy. And I was like, this is crazy. You were like, you think that's fucking crazy? Yeah, I've got a nephew who's older than me.
Yes.
And I was like, what?
So my sister, Stephanie, who's my
the
dad's
oldest of all
first kid, oldest of all the kids. She had her first child on her 17th birthday. She shares a birthday with her first child, Josh. Josh is my nephew, and he is 5 years older than me.
Right.
And then Stephanie's second child, Cody, was like 6 years later. Cody is 1 year younger than me, and we were thick as thieves growing up. Like, effectively cousins, you know what I mean?
Because he was really the only boy your age.
Yeah, my age. And we would just get into all sorts of nonsense. And he was very much like, let's go do some crazy shit. And I'd be like, yeah, let's do some crazy shit. And then we do some crazy shit. And he'd be like, let's take it to the next level. And I'm like, absolutely. And then we take it to the next level. And he'd be like, let's take it to the next level. And I'd be like, whoa, you can do that. That seems dangerous. And then he'd like break his leg. So
are there any other than Cody, who is destined to be on Jackass at this point in his life? Who are there artists in your family? Are there performers? Is everybody a pharmacist? What is the family dynasty of all these people? What are you guys all doing?
My direct siblings, we all kind of like got involved with the theater. And I think it just has to do with being in Austin, really has a lot to do with it.
There's none of that in Lake Jackson in this first part of the story. There's no like artistry or performers?
I performed in the Christian private school pageant, and I enjoyed that. I was,
but no one
angel.
in the family is what I'm saying. You don't have like an uncle who's a jazz flautist or some crazy.
My dad is very charismatic. I will say that he's a great storyteller. He's puts on a good show. He's very charming. He's always had friends that, like, anywhere we went around town, he'd see somebody that he knew, and he'd like be Mr. Charm.
Our dads kind of had that in common growing up. They were both. We likened both of them to Stacy Keach from Titus, the show from Fox. It was like, man, you nailed both of our dads.
Nailed our dads. Like the Tom Selleck mustache,
right?
Drinking beer and like being charming. Like that's our dads. And so my dad was always a people person. And I do remember he once performed in a play at our non-denominational Christian church called
Learn shit.
Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. Yeah, it was a play in which every scene was a scene in which some people were about to die, but they didn't know it. And one of them is like a born again Christian, and the other one's like living in sin, but charming and cool. And then they die for some strange reason. And then one of them gets to go to heaven, and one of them gets banished to hell. And everybody's sad that they get banished to hell. You know what I mean? Like nobody's like celebrating it, but it's like, man, if only we could have saved them, then they wouldn't have to burn in hell for eternity. And I still remember because my dad played, you guessed it, the guy who went to hell, and they're on an airplane, and he's all being like charming, like, yeah, I'm living my life, blah, blah, blah. I don't need Jesus. And then the airplane goes down, big ball flames or whatever. And then he's like, no, I want to go to heaven. Oh no. And then my sister, Stephanie, my oldest sister, she was playing the angel that like wrote people's names in the book. And then during that scene, every time when she's having to banish him to hell, she was crying. She was like always like crying, and she had to banish dad to hell in the play. Stephanie is a hoot, man. She got dad's like storyteller. We're all very ADHD, as we've all learned. My dad's very ADHD. Stephanie is insanely ADHD. Big personalities. Stephanie's an amazing storyteller. But like none of them were in the arts necessarily, but then like all of my direct siblings, like Amanda,
even your indirect siblings. That's the reason I do it.
Yeah. Like we got pulled in to the community theater, Sandbass Community Theater.
Who's the first one? Is Amanda the one who gets the credit for the initial connection? Yes,
it was Amanda. Amanda through her friend Alex.
Is your immediately older sister the one we went to high school with?
Yes, which we got delayed starting here because she was outside this door on a meeting for a stage management project she's doing.
So you close.
So we close. She did a play, this little one-act play fest at Sandbass Community Theater, which I imagine you mentioned on the show before.
I would imagine so, yeah.
And then they were like, they're having auditions for A Christmas Carol. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do that. And this was December of the year 2000. And I did Christmas Carol in the 7th grade, and I played Peter Cratchit. And Amanda was in it.
Which is the part everybody wants, Peter Cratchit.
That's the jam, man. That is if you get Peter Cratchit, you're destined for greatness. That is just how it goes. But yeah, and then so nowadays Amanda got her degree in lighting design, and then she just got her master's degree in stage management, so she's professionally stage managing. And Tiffany got her master's degree in costume design, and she works at the University of Alabama. And
so
her
two older sisters went the D&P route. Why are you not a designer?
I was gonna be for a second.
What?
Lighting. I was planning on doing lighting. Basically because I love the theater and it was my home away from home. And back whenever I discovered it in 7th, 8th grade, I was like, oh wait, I can go here and people won't call me a fag all the time. That's amazing. Like,
right.
People
And,
treat me
and
with
if I am one, it's okay.
It's so also okay. Like people treat me with like respect and like kindness,
Right.
and they see me and pay attention to me. Well, that's crazy.
Mhm.
And to be fair, so up until I found Sandbass Community Theater, I was still on the born again Christian path. I'd gone to Jesus camps from pre-K through fourth grade. I'd gone to private Southern Baptist Christian school. Then when mom moved us to Austin, we went to public school. So fifth grade was not only my first, it was like 1 year of elementary. Like it was the first year I was not in private Southern Baptist Christian school.
You know what's crazy is that when we were kids, dude, I remember a few different moments, particularly that your like Christian background in Lake Jackson. I grew up with my family's sent me like vacation Bible school and stuff, but they had a very laissez-faire attitude with commitment to the church. It was basically like, here it is, and it's there for you. But if you don't want to be, we're not going to make you, whatever. So I just kind of drifted away. And then even like young, like before I met you. And then when you showed up, you had all this like stuff about, oh, I was Baptist, and it kept coming up, and occasionally you would mention it. And other than this one time where you gave me all your CDs that had curse words in them because you were like, I'm going clean. I'm going curse word sober. And I was like, fucking dope. I'll take your Limp Bizkit CDs. And
Papa Roach, Limp Bizkit.
Other than that, I really treated your relationship to Christianity like when people are like, shouldn't you read the terms of service? I'm like, what? No, accept. Anyway, I'm just going to pretend like that's not a thing at all. And like it would occasionally come up and you'd be like, I'm going to be Christian now. I'm going to be like more Christian. And I'm going to be good. And I would be like, okay. Well, and then later it would kind of fall off and I'd be like, so
it was
all right,
I
guess we'll just be done. Yeah.
Because mom didn't really take us to church,
right?
Which I'm super grateful for. I'm serious. Like when we first got there, I knew this guy Bert Willis. If you remember Bert,
oh, of course, Robert Willis IV.
Yeah, Rob Willis, and he and his dad had he and his whole family unit had moved from Lake Jackson to Round Rock to start a church. And so when we first got there, we went to Spirit Life Church. We went to their church, and it was very small, only had a couple people. And we didn't. It was so boring. It was so terribly boring. And Robert was awesome. He was a good friend.
He's a great dude.
He's a great dude.
I'm still in touch with him from time to time.
But we fell off that, and like I said, I'm super grateful for it. But like during the summers for like a year or two, I would go to Jesus camp. Right. Like if you've seen the documentary, that's where I was at. I was at Jesus camp where people were speaking in tongues and being overcome with the power of the Holy Spirit. And you had 3 multi-hour church services per day. So
we never talked about that. Why would you never would talk to me about it when we were kids? I don't remember you ever bringing up that you did that.
I had to.
I'm not saying I didn't know you went. I know you went to stuff like that, but you never were like, hey, I just got back. Let me tell you a story about what happened there or anything. Like, I don't remember once you being like, oh man, I just got back from camp and it was great or it was terrible or nothing. It was like you would just kind of ignore it when you got back.
That's crazy because I feel like I would have talked because that was inextricably tied with when I gave you all of my secular CDs, as they call it. Because I remember they challenged us at Jesus camp to be like, you got to get rid of all your secular music. You know what I mean?
Right.
They trained us to be soldiers of God with your shield of faith and your sword of conviction. And the shield of faith is basically a tool in which, like, anytime any logical argument or anything that sounds like reasonable that counteracts your belief structure comes in, you just knock it away with the shield of faith. You know, like, but science, no, bam, shield of faith. But like, maybe people don't choose to be gay. God wouldn't make them that way. Shield of faith. That's how I understand it.
So how did you go from that to being the guy who gave me Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion? Because it's one of my favorite books, and I wouldn't have ever read it if you hadn't given it to me.
So what really stuck? The thing is, there are core tenets within Christianity, Southern Baptism or whatever, that got planted themselves deep within my psyche, and that I am grateful for. And one of them was really being opposed to hypocrisy. And really actual, like, they would always be like, don't be a hypocrite, don't be a hypocrite. You gotta practice what you preach. You gotta, and a genuine sense of a desire to be a good moral person in this world for the sake of something greater than yourself, beyond just your own edification. The fact that like it is each of our duty to try to be the best person that we can, because every single person needs to do that for the world to function well and to be better. Those things did get into my psyche, and I still carry them with me to this day. And those very things were the reason I left my faith hard, because it was like, and it was specifically the community theater, and meeting really wonderful gay people. That was the catalyst. Kyle and Dave, Joni and Leanne, Frank, and these people that were so kind and talented and like funny and smart and like treated us so well. And I had been taught in my faith, these people are going to burn in hell for eternity. And I still remember this one day when I would like spend like an hour or two walking up and down the river near the theater, or like up to the Round Rock or whatever that the city is named for. Like, I was 13 and I was like pondering. I was like how can these things be true? Like, what kind of God would banish these people to burn in hell for an eternity? And my light bulb moment was not, I don't believe in God. It was, a God who would do that is not worthy of my worship. And I hard left. It wasn't a gradual fade away. It was a, nope, I will not worship that God anymore. I'm out. Which is,
dude, that is, I didn't know that.
Really?
I like legit. I didn't know about like that specific day that you made that decision. I don't know if we ever talked about it that concrete. I think sometimes we take things for granted. And I think that there was a part of you that, because I didn't ever click with the Christianity thing, and once I left it when I was young, I was like, that's just not for me. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying I don't want to go, and I don't like the vibe I get when I'm around other people who take it super seriously. And then once we got at the theater, of course, I too, and I've mentioned this to those people that you named since then as a grown-up. I'm like, hey, Joni McLean, you're part of the reason why I have a progressive attitude about the whole world, because I was a young person still in that, like, hey, man, it's like 40 things going off in my head at once. But this all goes back to the thing I preach all the time about teaching and about kids. I don't have kids, but I've been a teacher many times. And I will say this, kids react at that age, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, really strongly to you treating them like adults. If you will treat them like the adults they think they're becoming, they will become that adult. They will. And that can go all sorts of different fucking ways. But with us, we both got so lucky, because I have a very conservative family. Not everyone in my family, and they're not all like hateful people or anything, but they weren't going out of their way to make friends with or join communities that were any different from theirs. Race, class, sex, gender, anything, none of that stuff. It was like they spent all their time with other people who fix cars and complain about it. There might be some Mexican people there. Like that was as diverse as my whole life got until we went to that space. And I think it is, first of all, that's fascinating that you made up that decision in that moment, and that we both were kind of on that track. And it's interesting because, like you said, what you carried with it and value from it is also what made you leave it. And those things are also what drew you to the place that made you leave it.
Yeah.
Because the reason you wanted to go to Sam Bass, the reason I wanted to go to Sam Bass Community Theater is because of community and examination of hypocrisy and there being something bigger than yourself that you're all working on and working towards and doing it for free. And we used to say all the time, it was like our church. Yeah. It's like we made our own church out of an old train station where instead of necessarily worshiping some old shit that hasn't been rethought in a while, we worship different things like love and acceptance and, examining how people treat each other. And, I'm so endlessly grateful. And I wish all the time that I could give that to more kids. Because when they talk about like community outreach programs and the football team you were on after school or whatever, man, that is so crucial. And I feel so bad for so many kids who, as fun as it is, go home every single day and just play video games until it's time to eat dinner and then play video games until it's time to go to bed. Because I do that some days here, but like to do it every day as a kid, it lacks that thing that we found at that place that, dude, we still fucking do the same thing.
Well, and to speak to just how profound some of those relationships are, my second oldest friend after you is Will Story. And Will Story and I met December of 2000 at Sam Bass Community Theater. And Will and I have been living together in New York City as roommates for over a decade.
Right.
Like he's one of my best and oldest friends, 10 years as roommates. And we met at the community theater at Sam Bass,
Right.
And, it's funny that you said, we created our own church. And I was like, well, some other people actually created a church and we started showing up. Like the people who created
I
that
say
space.
We royally, I don't mean you and I. We had anything to do with it. We were kids. But I mean like we, the community that was there.
Well, and like Lynn Beaver changed my life. Like she, before I could drive, before I had a car, I was like 13 or 14. My mom was working. She couldn't take me to rehearsal and pick me up. Lynn would drive to my house, pick me up, drive me to rehearsal. After rehearsal, she'd drive me home and she'd like bring me a Dr. Pepper because mom wouldn't buy me Dr. Pepper. So Lynn would buy me Dr. Pepper. Like Lynn was a second mom. Like Lynn changed my life without her being able to like picking me up and shit. Like I wouldn't have been able to be there. And I was so hungry for that community. Seventh grade was really shitty for you. 8th grade was really shitty for me.
Right.
I got bullied constantly. I'll say 8th grade was like to this day worst year of my life. Like,
can I ask you some questions about that? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
So here's what happened in our relationship that I find is an interesting like character study. And those of you who listen to this just to hear about people talk about being artists, come back and maybe in the next episode you'll learn some more. Because right now I'm fascinated with something that we haven't talked about on the show in a while, which is how does someone get started with this art? How does someone get started with the hunger and what we often talk about at school or we talk about in the artist community as an insatiable need, maybe a compulsion. A lot of people put different words on it, but the reason why we do this kind of shit. And I want to talk about what happened to us in middle school, because I think more happens there for a lot of people than we give credit to, because most people just don't want to talk about it because it was like the worst time in their whole life, much as you just alluded to. We had very different experiences at the exact same middle school, lived in the exact same neighborhood. And just because of our choices and personality, we experienced our first divide. So we met in 5th grade. After a brief little stupid, I hate you, you hate me, oh wait, let's be best friends, we became thick as fucking thieves. We were together all the time. 6th grade kind of stayed the same way. 7th grade, I started getting interested in girls. You started making friends with some, and with all due respect, some nerdier kids that I did not vibe with as well. A little bit more into the like nerd culture stuff that you and I both enjoyed, but they were a little bit deeper and you kind of clicked with them and I didn't really. And to this day, you have that whole community that I don't like really, but the D&D crowd, and I like everyone I meet, but most of the people that I meet that you have in that group, as was true in middle school, do I go like, would I hang out with him if Brandon wasn't here? I don't know, maybe. But it's not necessarily my thing, but they connect to a certain part of your personality. That's always been fascinating to me too. So you meet those people. I start trying to, meet girls, and I end up with a girlfriend for like almost all of 7th and 8th grade, which is so silly, but it was my first serious relationship, as young as it was.
Yeah.
And we had very different experiences of middle school. And one of the things that you mentioned, 8th grade was tough for you. It was also, it was the worst year of your life. It's not the best year of my life. I've had some great years, thank God, that have been better than 8th grade. But 8th grade was probably my best year of K through 12, maybe the best year. And my experience at middle school is, I'll shorten this because I want to talk about yours, but mine was 6th grade. I failed everything. So I had to spend the whole summer in between 6th and 7th grade in summer school. So 7th grade, I was like really trying to hustle it, but here's the thing. They put me on Adderall. So 7th grade got a lot easier and I got a lot skinnier. And overall, my life just got a lot easier because I was on drugs. And then all of a sudden I had the attention of girls and that was fun. And so it just started to feel pretty good. And then I got into 8th grade. I had a bunch of teachers because I was in the dumb classes because my grades were bad, but I was charming. I had all these like young teachers who just kind of let me skate by like I was in fucking 12th grade. And I was just chilling and I had a girlfriend and, I was like kissing and stuff. And so I was like having a good time finally. And I had found theater because of you. And meanwhile, my best friend, and I didn't even realize it really until later because I was wrapped up in my thing and you were in yours, you're having a terrible time in 8th grade. And I want to talk about just like where you think that came from. Why are you getting bullied? Why do you think you were an easy target? And then how did you deal with it? And then what do you think the lasting impact of that was?
I'd say one of the main logistical things was simply this. I decided it was a great idea for me to join athletics in 8th grade, even though I wasn't going to play a damn sport because I was doing plays all the time. So normally athletics is for you practice your sport. And I was like, I'll join athletics and be an off season all year long because they'll make me run. And that's good for me. So I would like, I'm the 8th grader who's like, I want to run all the time. That was a socially terrible idea because like the people in the middle school hierarchy at the top of the chain, they don't give a shit about bullying me.
You signed up for jock class.
I signed up for jock class. It's the people in the middle who are feeling very insecure about where they stand in the hierarchy.
Yes.
That want to raise themselves up by picking
the super hot, rich, popular people aren't usually mean.
No. Yeah. The super hot, rich, popular people, not mean. The people right in the middle of the hierarchy are the ones that are going to be absolute dicks to you.
Oh yeah. Who's the guy?
Hunter Priva. Okay.
No, I wasn't gonna ask for your.
It's like that was the fucking bully. You still remember your bully's name? You like the person who makes your life hell.
Well, what's crazy is that the guy that you do remember, his dad worked with my dad, and we used to go hang out with him and his sister and his brother, and go like tubing the river before he was your bully. He was like a buddy of mine through my dad's friends, and then years later, you're like, there's one guy who's really like the worst out of all of them. And I was like, who? What happened? And you told me, I was like, dude, my dad works with his dad. Like, that's crazy that him of all people, there's all these other kids I have no relationship with at all. And okay, but no, what I was going to say was, who's the guy in Game of Thrones who's like on the council, but he wants to fuck everything up so he can win?
Oh, Peter, no, Peter Baelish.
Yes.
Yeah, Littlefinger.
Yes. It's like, that's the dude who fucks everything up. It's never the king often just does nothing because he's a king. He's got nowhere to go. He's the winner. The winner doesn't ruin everything. Yeah. It's the one who almost won who's pissed he lost.
But then but then there's this other guy who is like the big jock guy, one of the big jock guys and the big theater guy. And then whenever I was really good at acting, he made him feel insecure. And then he started sticking his dudes on me as well. but
so you joined, but what do you think it is about your personality or what you did? I mean, you're not like a loud, obnoxious, like Michael Scott from The Office kind of person. Like, why go after you? You were kind of a quiet middle schooler when you weren't asked to perform.
I was quiet. I was very quiet and very introverted at the time.
Very Severus Snapey. I say that as a compliment.
It was kind of I was smart, quiet, and introverted.
Yeah.
And I was always going and doing theater. And I got called faggot like every day of my life. Queer, faggot, whatever.
For doing theater, or was it about
just in general?
You said, or was there anything about it that made them pick that insult?
And I still remember there were times
I'm trying to pick apart the psyche of 14-year-old boys, but I'm telling you, I think that there's something interesting about this.
I mean, maybe part of it, like, it took me years to like really own the fact that I identify as bisexual.
Right.
So maybe there's some of that coming through.
I probably wouldn't identify that way, or at least, no, I probably wouldn't have figured out I identify that way if it weren't for you.
Right. And it's like, so, that some of that might have been.
That sounds like we did shit together.
We did
That's not what I meant.
That's not.
I heard
that
it
never happens.
after I said it.
To be fair,
that didn't happen. That's not what I meant. Continue.
Moving on. So I mean, maybe that was part of it. I was, I doing lots of therapy over the years and picking apart my own psyche. I think I grew up in a house where there's a lot of emotional volatility, and I learned that the way that I could control my environment was to control my emotions, not express them, and act very logically and try to control the situation around, some
Spock style
adult children of alcoholic kind of stuff. Being really good at like people pleasing, assess your situation. And to be fair, I think that a lot of the reason why I got into acting and why it was cathartic for me and why I loved it was because it was a safe space to feel emotions. It was that I didn't feel safe in life to feel my emotions, but I had them. I had a lot of them.
Right.
And like there was not any emotional support at home.
Right.
Like, we were
so many people. That's ironic.
It's so many people, but we all were our own little islands.
Right.
We're our own little islands. And I felt very alone, and I was very insular, very introverted, played a lot of video games, and and the thing is I was good at acting. And so that's what I started clinging to, is that I was like, no matter, that's the thing they can't take from me, is that I'm good at acting. I'm good at theater. And like, I was like, that's what I'm going to base my personality on. So like middle of 8th grade, because I was just like, and because I was going to school during the day, being bullied incessantly. And then I got to go to the theater at night where people treated me awesome. And I did like every play I could that year. And a lot of them were adult plays where there's no role for somebody like me. So I ran the lights, or I ran the sound, or I ran the backstage, or I built the set, or, and so why I wanted to be a technician initially, because I was like, I just want to be in the theater because it's my safe haven, and it's joyful, and it's a place that I feel accepted and loved and valued. And that's incredible. And like in the middle of 8th grade, I went all in on being the theater kid, and I started wearing, in Central Texas, mind you, year round, black slacks, black turtlenecks. And that was my wardrobe for 2 years, from which, when you're that age, is a long time. From middle of 8th grade, all of 9th grade, until the middle of 10th grade, I wore all black. I wasn't goth. I was a one-man beatnik revolution. People would be like, you're goth. And I'm like, do I look goth to you? Do I have makeup? Do I have goth hair? No, I'm the theater. I'm the theater kid. Oh, I'm sad. don't get me wrong, but don't get me wrong. Goth is not about being sad. It's about what you do with that sadness.
Right. Like, I'm sad, but it's
a
none
lot
of
of
your
goth,
goddamn business.
a lot of goth is about expressing how sad and angry you are in your dress, like in your clothes, your makeup, that thing.
Demeanor.
Like, yeah, demeanor. Don't get me wrong. I was very sad inside, and as such, I do have some deep affinity and love for goth, emo. You know, I went to EmoCon this year at Vegas. We went the When We Were Young concert music festival. It was great. Yeah, I am a little goth emo inside, to be fair. But,
sure.
But yeah, so
what brought you out of that? You said like middle of 10th grade, you decided to stop doing that shit. Did you realize that there was more to it, or did something happen?
I wasn't being bullied in high school. And like, it's funny, whenever I watch portrayal of media and television of like high school, it's so terrible with all the bullies and popular kids. I don't relate to that at all.
Right.
In high school, because you only went to McNeil for freshman year, right? Like,
and sophomore year.
McNeil was a big school, like 3,500 kids or something like that. And, they got a little smaller as you went on. But when your class is like 900 people, it doesn't actually, and you're just mixed and matched in classes with different teachers and stuff, it doesn't actually sustain the kind of small pool popularity hierarchy that a small high school does. So like, if you ask me who are the popular kids in high school, I don't know. I couldn't tell you one. I know who the theater kids were because they were my people. And I know who like the choir kids were. And like, I know who, like, there were all the different little cliques became the thing. And I showed up in 9th grade being like, I'm the actor kid. And I still remember,
and you were the other actor kid's little brother.
Yeah, my sister Amanda was a senior that year when I was a freshman, and she was big player in the theater department at school. And so I showed up being like her little brother, and I was like, I'm not going to be the annoying little brother. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm not going to annoy people. And years later, our friend Anthony would be like, he was a senior with Amanda. He was like, I thought you were cool. I had no idea why you didn't want to hang out with us. In my mind, I was like, I don't want to annoy them. But I remember freshman year, high school has their hierarchy where you like got to pay your dues. So freshmen never get cast as like big parts in plays. And so like they had Romeo and Juliet, and they held their auditions, and they were like, we would like to cast you in Romeo and Juliet as a freshman. You're going to play Balthazar, which is a small role that like delivers Romeo like a message. And it was the biggest part any freshman had been offered. And I was like, yeah, nah, I'm gonna go be the lead in these plays at Sandbags Community Theater, and then I would go on to like win like Best Young Actor in Austin at like for doing the King Stag or whatever. And so like by my sophomore year, I became popular in the theater group. Like I found my people, and I was not being bullied at all. And then it was like, cool, I can just be me and feel good about that. But I think that one of the things I really value to this day is knowing how it felt to be bullied and like abused in that way has always given me tremendous amount of compassion and empathy for people not at the top of whatever hierarchy you're hanging out in. And I remember, I would go on like my senior year of high school, like was a great year. I had the best time. And like I would always host all the parties, like all the cast parties, and everything would like happen at my place. And I always made a point of like, everyone is invited. Everyone, freshmen are invited. But like, I am not excluding anybody who wants to be here, because I know what it felt like to be shit on and excluded, and fuck that. And one of the freshmen my senior year, who was like at the time, like, kind of insecure and like trying to figure out his own way. I remember really feeling a lot of empathy for him and being like, no, I want to, be kind to him, help him out. He's got a lot of potential. He would go on, his name is Mark, and he would go on to go to college for acting, move to New York, and he lives next door. Like literally, we share a rooftop, and like we're friends this day, 17 years, I guess now. So it's funny because I can like look back at how shitty being like bullied was, but also recognize the like degree of like empathy that it affords me. And like whenever I have quote unquote power, if you will, by that I mean being at the top of any given hierarchy. Like there's hierarchies everywhere, right? You're at your fucking job, wherever the hell. Like humans organize themselves in every hierarchy. Whenever I find myself near the top of one somewhere, I feel like I have a lot of compassion and awareness of like what it feels like to not be near the top, and to have a lot more consciousness about how my actions might be affecting those people. You know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like, when it comes to tragedy and trauma in our lives, right? It's almost like you can look at it like an equation. And it doesn't mean that it always brings sense to it, but I think it's a fascinating way to think of it, which is like, what is the return on investment? Which is like, okay, you get bullied when you're a kid, all right? Does that automatically mean that you're going to gain empathy? No. But it might be the thing that gives you empathy when you didn't have it. You might, like you said, now you think about it and you're like, I'm thinking about those people who were in the position that I was in that was unpleasant. Some of those people who did the bullying to you, who went out of their way every day because they were insecure to fuck your shit up, there's no telling whether or not they ever recovered from that. Do they still treat people that way? Did they grow up and they look back and they're like, man, I was a piece of shit because something happened to me later that caused that? And at the end of the day, you look at the math maybe on your experience, and the ROI is like pretty great, which is like you had to spend 8th grade miserable, like the whole year, which statistically, based on everyone I've ever talked to, and most people probably listening to this, whose 8th grade is good other than mine? Apparently nobody's. So it wasn't going to be good anyway. But you got it all condensed into this tight period. And then with a little bit of a transitional 9th grade year, let me wear black all the time so I don't have to develop a real personality outside of the one I'm making for everybody, eventually results in a tremendous amount of success socially and built on authenticity and integrity, and not insecurity like those other people. You weren't having everybody over to your house and hosting parties and making sure the freshmen were there because you thought you were a piece of shit. And if you could surround yourself with enough people telling you that you're great, then you might love yourself. I don't believe that that's true. I think you genuinely, in a conscious, like, I want to make the world better way, took action to try to make the world better. And does it feel good when everyone's at your house saying, thank you for having this for us? Sure. It's not mutually exclusive. You can do both things. But I think, and I remember those parties. I went to those parties too, even though I went to a different high school. And that was another thing. That, you didn't have to go out of your way to include me in stuff after I moved away and came back in high school, but you still did. It took me some time to recognize, like, dude, you left and they built more community and relationships while you were gone. You can't just fit back into that like a puzzle piece. But I also didn't have to not be a part of my old friends community because of you, because the social gatherings with all the people that I used to know are happening at my best friend's house, who's never going to not be my best friend. And you created that opportunity for everybody. It's interesting that you mention all of that because, and I think one of the things that I noticed about the way you tell the story is you would say things like, I entered 9th grade, or I'm going to do this play at Sam Bass, or I was in the King Stag. We did all of those things, but you chose the word I as you were telling the story, which I think I know better over this time that what that comes from is your desire not to speak for other people, which I know is really important to you. And you want to make sure that you only ever speak for yourself. So you use your I pronouns far more than your group pronouns. But I also think about how my brain even recognizes that, because I always felt like growing up, there was this thing that you were on without me. And I remember one time, I cannot remember where we were going or what we were coming from or what. I got in the car with you and your mom. I've told you this story before. I got in the car with you and your mom, and you were talking about how you were going to go to Summerstock, Austin, and do this theater camp thing in the summer that I didn't even know existed. You're telling me all about it. And I was like, that's so cool. Are there more auditions? Like, how does that work? Because up to that point, we had done several things together. And you told me about it. And you were like, no, the auditions were before, and I did callbacks or whatever. Like I'm through it. It's already over. And I was like, why didn't you tell me about it? And we ended up kind of getting into this argument, and your mom really backed you up. And it hurt my feelings at the time, but I 100% understand where it was coming from, which is like, you guys were like, we've talked about, we don't feel like you have the same ambition. Like you're not going to work as hard. And I don't know, I don't know that wasn't true necessarily, though I had worked very hard at everything that involved theater at the time. I was bad in school and shit like that, or maybe I'd done something personally that had made you guys feel that way, but it definitely hit me hard, and it stuck with me for a really, really long time. That like, I thought we were on the same page. I thought we were going to do all the same stuff. And it always felt like we got to do a lot of the same stuff, but then you always had like one other thing or something else that you did without me, or that you didn't tell me about. And maybe eventually I would get involved with it. But at first it was like you were on your own path that I wanted to be on, but I didn't know about it until after you were already like, I'm doing this thing. And I'd be like, okay, were there 2 spots on the thing? But it's funny because I spent so much of our young life feeling that way. I'm not in our adult life, but really I spent a lot of our young life feeling that way, especially, as a teenager. And it's so weird that that's there, because I think that there is no person that is not my family who is more responsible for who I've become as a person than you. I wouldn't be any of the stuff that I am or have any of the things that I have if it wasn't for you. I would not be doing this podcast if it was not for you. Like, you're the one who brought me to Sandbass Theater. You're the one who told me about School of the Arts. You're the one who got me the hookup for the interview at Comedy Central that became my first job in television. Literally, every big thing that's happened in my life that has been great I can draw it back to something that you did for me. So it's so ironic that for so long I was like, he doesn't share enough with me. I'm like, I look back now and I'm like, what a fucking juvenile, terrible attitude about somebody who just wanted to also have their own stuff. That was the thing, is that you were living your life. Another thing, I'll comment on this because I don't want to finish that thought, but another thing on that list that's important before I finish, you're the reason I'm not a liar anymore. Because we had a sit down conversation more than once where you were like, you have a bad habit of not telling the truth when you get scared, and it's going to fucking ruin your life and our relationship if you don't fix it. And it is a huge, huge, huge part of why I did the work to recover from being truly a compulsive liar. And so
that conversation, yeah.
It's on a long list of things that you've done, but you were operating at the time, and have always, in my opinion, from a place where you kind of seem to instinctually believe in the law of abundance. You believe that there is enough for everyone. And instead of trying to keep it all for yourself and believing in scarcity of like, oh, there's only so much popularity, there's only so much power, there's only so many parts in the play, there's only so many whatever. You don't, and have never, I can vouch, at least since 1999, I can vouch for the fact that you've never operated from that belief that it's a scarce world, and you simply pass it along to everybody else. And I think God, I don't want to give you too much credit. I want to own some of my own fucking good qualities, but I got that from you too. I don't ever have a person that is subordinate to me at work or in any scenario, an assistant director, an associate producer, anybody who ever works for me, who I don't go, what do you want? What do you want? Like, how do you want to get there? How can I help you get there? Things that people never ask me for the most part, very few people, things you would ask somebody, which is like, how can I help you do what you want to do? Because we live in a fucking America. It's fucking cotton candy, everywhere. And you do nothing but try to lift other people up. And I don't understand how you have the fucking energy for that. I do it when it's convenient. If I have an assistant and we're working together all day and we wrap the day up, I do what the ADs at school did or the directors at school did. And they go, hey kid, what do you want? What do you want to do? We got 20 minutes. Let's talk. You will take a whole day to go teach somebody something. And I guess I would do it if someone asked me, but you seem to do shit like that all the time. Where do you get the natural energy you come from, man? That's the big question. That's the Brandon Harris question, right?
Well, a combination of ADHD and stimulants help. But
yeah, but I was on Adderall when I was a kid. You weren't.
I think that, first of all, thank you for saying that. So when I was pretty young, I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read it multiple times through, and I put gaff tape all over the cover so people couldn't see it because it felt manipulative or whatever. But one of the main things that I really took away that sunk into me was, it was like, you want to be popular and have friends? Like people. Be genuinely interested in other people. And there was this poem that I remember. It was on the wall of my ninth grade English teacher's room or whatever. And I read it one day and it just hit me. It hit me super hard. So much so that I would go online and buy a poster back when shopping online was still hard. I had to get my mom's credit card and stuff. And there's a poster called Desiderata. I've never known how it's pronounced. Desiderata, whatever. And it's I don't know if I can do the entire thing from memory, but I remember it was a lot of just advice about life that really resonated with me. And one of the phrases in it is hold on there. Okay. Let me just pull it up. I got the poster on the wall and I read it all the time. Poem by Max Ehrman. I mean, the whole thing, I'm not going to read the entire thing to you because it's very long. But one of the things is that it says in it, as far as possible without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly and listen to others, even to the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. And I remember that really got through to me in this thought of every single person has their story. And how I sometimes describe it, because I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, or video games is another way of describing it. I consciously every day try to remember that other humans that I'm around are not NPCs.
Right, non-player characters.
They're not non-player characters. They're not just figures in my storyline.
They're the hero in their story.
They're the hero in their storyline. And this thought that every person in the world probably has something to teach me. And
oof, that is, man, I believe you believe that. I do. I really do. And I hear that and it sounds like a great advice and you should like everybody. But there's a few things, man. I don't know how to, okay, here's a sincere question. how does one get better at these things? It hits your brain as a thought and you go, of course. And then you just live your life being like, that's true. What happens when you hear that and someone like you say, I have something to learn from everybody? I think there's a reasonable chance that a lot of people that I meet, I've already learned the thing I could learn from them from somebody else. I think there's a really good chance that's the case. And I would love to be proven that that's not the case. But I feel like the longer I get to know some people, the more they just prove that they're bringing nothing new to the table.
One of my, a light bulb moment that I had in acting some years ago was the reality that a play is not actually a representation of life. A story is not a representation of life. They are radical oversimplifications of life for our understanding.
Right. Yeah, you have to.
You like any story, no matter how many details you put in, is still going to be a radical simplification of what actually happened. And that's
watch
just
two documentaries about the same thing, and you'll understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, like that's just how the human brain works. That's just how we do not have the capacity to sit with the infinite complexity of the world as it actually is. Right. And like one of the things I think about is like, think about one of the people you know best take any person, one of the people you know best in the world. So for you, it'd be like Candace. How well do you know Candace? Right. Could you always predict what she was going to do in any given moment? No, because one human being is so complex and nuanced that even the person who knows them best in the world still is not going to be able to fully predict what they're going to do.
Right.
And so every human being is more complicated than we give them credit for. And it is very in vogue, or it feels really good and cynical to feel superior to other people. I had one of my early therapists.
I don't think it's in vogue. I've felt it for 34 years, so I don't know when it falls out of vogue.
One of my my therapist for many years, who's one of the smartest humans I know. Years ago, she said something to me that hit me really interestingly. She was like, Brandon, I don't think most people understand just how smart you are because you like to make people feel good.
I know that that's true. I will agree with that 100,000%. And I'll stack my chips on that if it were a verifiably, 100% that's true. You and Will Story, who you mentioned earlier, to this day, I think, are the two smartest people I've ever met in my whole life. And you were my oldest friends. And I don't think that the people even around you who know you best even really get how fucking smart. And they'd be like, oh yeah, they're smart guys. But you guys, because you also don't work, you're not doing the work of like, you don't work at like Tesla. You didn't go to MIT or something. There's not something that like people can point to and be like, they accomplished this thing. Will has a good SAT score, but who gives a shit? But I really think to this day, and I'm so grateful to have you as friends, because I thought I was smart when I was a little kid. And then I met you two fuckers and you kept me humble the whole time. I felt like the dumbest guy all the time. And I was like, I'm smart. I know I'm smart. Most people I meet, I can figure out pretty quickly they're dumber than me. But then I would go hang out with you two fucks and I'd be like, what are you even talking about? Like, it's going on. You'd be talking about like we were talking about like quantum mechanics in like 11th grade.
Yeah, that document. What the bleep do we know? That was we talked about
Brandon. That's not normal. We're not Tony Stark. Why are we talking about this? But we were like, oh, actually, this is another world. I was like,
because
Jonathan Majors is in a movie right now about the thing that we were like nerding out about in 7th grade or whatever.
To do a callback, quantum mechanics was the reason why I went from being hardcore atheist back towards agnostic again, because it was like scientific
There's
like
clearly shit we don't know.
scientific foundational shit that points to the fact that there are things going on the surface that we truly don't understand. And I was like, all right, I don't believe in like God or any of this religion shit, but I'm gonna but saying like there is for certain no energetic
is
flow
as
or anything
dumb as the
beyond
people who say for certain there is a God.
yeah, exactly.
Opinion.
And I was like, exactly. So that's why I went hard into atheism, and then it was quantum mechanics, which I was like, all right, we'll go back into the I don't have it all fucking figured out school of thought, you know.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah, and see, that's the thing is I think people think about you and they're like, oh, Brandon, yeah, actor, handyman, bartender, so many things that you can put on to, huge into this D&D thing and party host. Dude, you could be every one of those things and be stupid. You don't have to be a smart person to be known for any of the stuff you do. Even handyman, man, you learn a few muscle memory things. You don't have to be like an engineer. That's not the same job. But I think it is absolutely true, man. I think you're one of the smartest people that I know. And I think that every time that I talk to you about something I don't understand, even if you don't understand it better than me, I understand it better after our conversation, after I talk to you about it, because there's no one else who, gives me the same kind of perspective. I just don't think, and maybe it's your infinite role playing, since 2000, all you've done is make it your thing to
do. And Lord, do I wish that I had like leveraged, because I started playing D&D regularly in 2012, and if I had hit while the iron was hot, man, there's Critical Role, Dimension 20, like it went mainstream, baby.
I have no idea what you're saying right now. You lost me completely. Not that mainstream.
Side mainstream, not mainstream enough.
What are all the things that you're saying? Are these TV shows or?
There's a bunch of podcasts and TV shows and stuff that have huge followings now. Anyways, but yeah, and I'd say one of the other things is there's a couple little pieces of like art and poetry and stuff that had like really profound impacts on me. I listened to the Sunscreen song a lot whenever I was
Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, listen to that shit a lot. I can quote the whole thing.
You seem like you were hungry to be told how to be and what to do now that Christ was not the answer.
Yes.
So you're like, there used to be this book that everyone told me had all the answers, and I recently found out that I cannot trust that book so much.
Correct.
So you're gonna need some new books because you're like a books guy.
Yeah. I rated half price books like crazy. When I graduated college, I had over 500 books.
Why the hunger? Why not the desire to like find through experience? What is it that makes you feel like if both. You can read it beforehand?
Let's not blow smoke up my ass. I hadn't read most of those books. I'd cracked many of them, but I didn't have time. I have been doing the experience, and to this day, I don't read as much as I want to because I keep myself busy all the time. I am actually hungry for experience.
And I get that, but my question is more about the impulse in your younger years to attempt to, we were reading, you and I, because of you, were reading books in high school about how to have sex with women or whomever you'd like to have sex with.
The guide to getting it on.
Yeah. We were reading books on how to give a massage. We were learning skills. Like some people didn't even want to learn what they were learning in high school, but you were like the body sculpting Bible for men. You read a book about how to work out. It was like, what is it? Who taught you to read it in a book? No one ever taught me that. And I have never pursued that. I read nonfiction. I like autobiographies and shit. That's what I read. Those are the only books I read. I don't read novels. I don't read how-tos. You were like, oh, I want to know how to do this. Let me go find a book on it. You did that forever, whether you read the book or not.
I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but you're right in that I developed a hunger for knowledge, and this idea of like the best investment I can ever make in my life is in myself and in knowledge and in personal development and personal like emotional growth. And the work is like, never done, but It's funny.
And you're attracted to the written word of all mediums of learning.
Nowadays I listen a lot. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, podcasts, that kind of stuff as well. But I will say that it's funny you say it, because the other probably most instrumental book that I would say that changed me the most, I didn't read until like senior year of college. There's actually a book called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, who's
I don't know this one.
Josh Waitzkin was this guy. He was you ever heard of the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer?
Yeah, the chess movie.
Yeah, it's about the chess kid.
Mm-hmm.
So the chess kid in real life is Josh Waitzkin.
Oh.
And he would grow up. He was like really good at chess. He would grow up to take on and be another completely different study, which is the study of Tai Chi and Tai Chi Chuan push hands, which is a competition, and he would go on to become an international champion of Tai Chi Chuan push hands, which is a martial art that is majorly practiced in other countries. So for like an American guy, and not in a country it's a cultural real major thing, to go on and become a international champion of this completely separate art of martial art. He wrote this book because he realized, he's like, I'm good at chess. I'm also good at this, but the thing I care the most about and the most invested in is the process of learning. How do you learn? How do you learn better? And the idea that learning itself is a skill. The ability to learn is a skill that can be practiced, and you can learn to learn better. And one of the central premises is this idea that he calls the investment in loss, which is the thing that is the hardest for you, the most frustrating, is the thing you have the most to learn from. And so you need to lean in. You need to lean in to the thing that is the hardest, the thing that is the most difficult, the thing that frustrates you the most.
I agree with that so hard. And I get into arguments with people in my life. I got in an argument with my dad like last year. And I was like, why is it so hard for you to talk about X, Y, Z? And he was like, well, it makes me really uncomfortable. And I was like, isn't that a sign that you should find a way to talk about it? And he goes, what? Why would I want to talk about something that makes me feel bad? And I was like, I am not qualified for the amount of therapy to unpack that statement that you just said. How easy is your head? How easy is it to live in your brain that you're like, well, that just makes me uncomfortable. I'll just pack it away in there. Like, you don't know that's a bad idea.
But that's so much of what our culture has done for so long.
I know, but that's what's crazy to me, Brandon. We talked earlier about Christmas Carol. That is my go-to example of, I don't understand how many versions of a Christmas Carol we have to make before people understand that greed might be a slippery slope and it might be reasonable to not be a dick all the time. Yet there's all these greedy dicks everywhere. And it's like, what do you need, man? Muppets, Michael Caine, Michael Keaton, Bill Murray. Who do you want to tell you the story of stop being a greedy piece of shit? We have it. We just made a new one with Ryan Reynolds. Does that help?
See, one of my problems with money is that I just act like Scrooge at the end of Christmas Carol, but I didn't actually make any of the money. You know what I mean? So, but I'm like, yeah, I'll buy you a turkey. Yeah, you want a turkey? Hell yeah. Then I look at my bank account and I'm like, well, I can't afford a turkey myself, but I'm glad they have a turkey.
Man, again, you got to watch the whole movie. This is the point that I'm making. And this is the thing where it's like, I feel like, again, I come back to this thing of, man, I make jokes all the time about it, but I do have a thing in my heart where I know I have character flaws. I do things and I fuck things up all the time. I'm not perfect. I say all that to disclaim the fact that I find some things like I'm impatient about how many people seem to struggle with something for so long. There are certain issues where I'm like, man, addiction. I'm not that critical about people who have addiction problems because I'm like, I understand how all that gets started. And I've been right there in the face of how hard it is to get away from it. And so I have a lot of patience with that. But then it's like being unkind when your feelings are hurt. I'm not patient with that. Hurt people. So I got my feelings hurt. So I'm starting to be mean. What? Get out of here. What are you, 12? Like I have no patience for people who do things I consider to be juvenile. That would be a great example. You hurt my feelings. I get a legit hurt. I will shut down, walk away, have a nice day. I'm not going to get in a fight. It's not even a non-confrontational, not dealing with it. It's like, I can see even a confrontation won't solve this. I'm going to step off. But the people who are just like, yeah, let's go, let's make a fight out of it. I'm like, that seems so uncivilized. It seems barbaric to me. And I don't understand what movie, what TV show, what piece of what book, what painting, what parent needs to talk to you to like get you to understand not to react that way in that moment, even if there's an impulse in you that feels like it's the right call. I don't know. And I don't know how to look at that person and be like, I got something to learn from this asshole. I mean, if I spent a lot of time, I could probably learn about how they became an asshole, but my wife's a therapist. She'll tell me why that's how it is.
Well, I'm a therapy junkie. And so much of what drew me to acting as well was like the fascination with humans and human emotional construct and trauma.
Yeah. And I love that. I really do. I have to say, but it's like, it doesn't, that person in that moment and probably later does not attract me to them to figure out the things. I would rather go talk to my wife about it later and be like, you notice how he was being a piece of shit? What do you think that's about? Was it like his dad or hit him or something? I don't know. I don't know, but I wish he wouldn't fucking yell that shit at me.
Right.
That's what I'm more concerned with today.
One of the other things that landed on me majorly from that book that I was telling you about, that has really become incorporated just a part of my personality, is this idea, like in Tai Chi, that whenever something like comes at you, it can only hurt you if you resist it, as opposed to if you let it pass by. Like a fist is only gonna like break your face if you're standing there resisting it, but if it moves with it, like it doesn't take damage. And so this idea of like when somebody throws something at you, letting it fly by you,
right?
And to some degree, like I am fine. It's funny. I am. Some people need to be the smartest person in the room. I am fine with people not understanding how smart I am a lot of the time.
So weird because you're so competitive.
But the thing is, well, maybe it's partly the competitive nature is if people underestimate you, it gives you an advantage. Sure. So like if somebody's a dick with like being a kind of a dick, I have many times in my life just like if it's not something that is like a personal direct affront, right?
Right.
Like somebody's like belittling or insulting me and it's a way of like not standing up for myself is going to belittle myself and I lose my own self-respect. That's very different. There's sometimes people are just kind of a dick or kind of passive, like and it's their own thing. And I can just be like, let that shit fly by. Yeah. Because it's like,
but that's what I'm saying, Brandon. I'm with you on let it fly by. What do you have to learn from that?
I don't know. You never know. I still like to be like, I wonder who that person is beneath the surface. There's just a curiosity. It's like, I wonder who the fuck that person, I wonder what the fuck that person's deal is. Don't get me wrong. There's a select few people in this world that I don't like. But I can become, I'm generally so interested in people and what makes them tick and just like, that I find it very easy to just be interested in a person enough to.
I mean, bro, in the right setting, I'm just like you. Obviously, I'm hosting a podcast. I've been doing this forever, and I talk to people at length about themselves. It's not because I love me. I could just. That wouldn't do anything. I like sharing my own stories, but I'm legitimately interested in these people. I want to understand how they think, why they think. I had a great conversation this morning with our friend John Bowers. I haven't talked to him in so long.
Oh, great.
And yeah, he's the best. He didn't want to do the show. Has his own reasons for doing it, which I totally understand. But I still wanted to have the whole catch up with him. I love him. I like the people I like. I'm interested in the people I'm interested in. But I feel like I encounter people sometimes in my life. It's not even the mean. That was not a great example of someone that I don't think I could learn from. But I do think, or maybe it is, but I think I'm interested in the people who get my attention in some way. And so many people seem gray to me. Maybe it's that I don't dig in, but I get to know some people like on jobs. Maybe I work on a TV show for a few seasons with somebody. And it's like the third season. I feel like, work friends at this point. We've gotten to know each other okay. I know where part of town they live in, a little bit about their family, what state they're from, or whatever the fuck. And then I think to myself, like, what if they're not on the next season? And then I'm like, I don't care. I hope they're happy. But I just like, man, there's no value to my life. I don't feel it to myself. Like I have more to learn from them. You know what I mean? I don't feel an attraction to get them to like me. If they do, they don't. I don't give a shit. Like it just doesn't, I don't feel that. And especially when I leave, we've talked about this before. When I leave a situation socially, like I left Austin or I left New York or I left North Carolina, it matters not at all to me what I'm thought of after I leave. Like what the people think of me, which sometimes is to my own detriment.
Well, and maybe the whole thing of everyone has something to teach me is a little disingenuous. So let me put it this way. Like I assume everyone has a thing to teach me until proven otherwise, until
that is a great adjustment.
The default assumption is that somebody's going to have something to teach me. And then maybe after a while I can be like, maybe they don't, but I give them the benefit of the doubt.
Sold.
In the same way that for like, to me, it feels very similar to you don't have to earn my respect. My respect is given. You can lose it.
Right.
But I will give you respect by default.
Right.
By default, I will assume that you're an interesting person that has maybe something to teach me. You can prove me wrong.
Yeah.
But my default assumption is that you're worth my time to some degree. And I'm reminded of this other.
That is a great, I don't know have you articulated that before this moment? Because I think that's a really good thought that I've not heard a lot of before. I think that there's this like the blanket, everybody really does make a big difference. Not just in that one thought, but in a lot of things people say of like, everybody has a story or everyone has a story. Some of them are not worth making a TV show about. They're boring stories. I've heard them from start to finish. And I'm like, who cares? Like good. You're entitled to your story. You could have taken some risks that might've provided a few twists and turns to it, but whatever. But what you just said, I think is so valuable and well articulated, which is it is the best approach. The best approach is to go through life, and when you encounter a new person, give them a benefit of the doubt, but that they have something to teach you, some kind of value, and not like for you to use up in a non-empathetic way. That's not what we mean.
Mm-mm.
But they listen to them before you make up your mind. Don't read, don't judge the book and stuff. Yeah.
That was my first tattoo written on my right wrist. Is just the word listen.
It's a good reminder, man.
I got that when I was like 24, I guess. And the other thing that this is triggering within me, and I hate to just I feel like I am an amalgam of a lot of sources of wisdom and thought that and whenever I'm asked like what motivates me, a lot of these stories pop up. But there's this year back in my early days of New York, I'd like listen to a bunch of motivational tapes and stuff like that. And some of them are crap, some of them are whatever, but there's a couple things that really stuck with me. And one of them was the story about like Henry Ford, who has his own problems, let's be real. But the people beneath him, he paid like millions of dollars a year, which was unheard of at that time. And somebody asked him in an interview, they're like, how on earth are these people so valuable to you that you would pay them like millions of dollars a year? And the quote that he said that always did stick with me. And, he had his own problems, so take this with some grain of salt, but is that you mine people like you mine for gold. To find gold, you often have to move hundreds, thousands of pounds of rocks and dirt to find a little bit of gold. but you don't go in looking for the dirt. You go in looking for the gold. And so it's when you have a lot of insecurity that's running you, and you're looking around to find other people's flaws to make you feel better about yourself, you're going to find them. Everyone has flaws. But when you look for the redeeming qualities or the strengths in people, you will also find them. You find what you look for in this world. That doesn't mean everybody's awesome and worth your time. I'm not saying that. But you find what you look for. And if you're operating out of a place where you're trying to find the shitty things about people, guess what? Guarantee you'll find them. But like, if you can help someone see the better part of themselves, or help someone understand why they're valuable, why they're special, why they're important, you can be really important. You can change their life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in this world are operating out of insecurity, where they don't feel great about their position. They're highly aware of their own flaws, and so they're looking for other people's, and they will find them.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I assume by default, I assume everyone may have something to teach me. And also I'm looking for redeeming qualities.
Right.
In anybody that I meet.
I think I'm that way too, because most of the people I meet these days are through work. I don't have that many social circles, honestly, where I'm doing like super social things that aren't work related. And so when I meet people at work, I think that that's what I do, but it's sort of in the middle, right? Which is like, I don't dive in too much. When I have a new person who works very close to me, I do. I'm like, where are you from? Tell me your story. Let me help you, blah, blah, blah. But if they're like adjacent, or I just see somebody on set or there's something going on, I feel like what I'm trying to do is cultivate an environment where there's room for people to show up, to impress, to do something. It's like, I used to have directors at School of the Arts when I was in AD, all over the spectrum of how much they would let you get involved with the production. And inevitably, you would have your directors who were like, just shut the fuck up and take notes, don't talk. Like, okay. And you learn a lot from them, John
Right.
Langs. You learn a lot from them fucking, because they know what they're doing. And they're just like, I need someone to write shit down. I will do everything else. And you're like, okay. And then you have other directors who are like Tanya is really good at this. She'll like ignore you. And then Tanya Bailoff will be like, what you think? And you're like, what do I think? And she goes, yes, I look at you. And you're like, shit. And you get an opportunity to contribute in a kind of specific, measured way. You don't have open forum to talk all the time. You shouldn't be doing that. You're not going to create the volume of helpful things at that rate. You need to listen, like Yervis says, fucking just pay attention, but build that up. And then in your moment, have a thought. You should have had one before she asks you, because you should be thinking actively about it. And I think that that's something that I'm always trying to be that Tanya about it, where I'm watching people as we're working. And I'm like, what if this chick is hilarious and no one's ever asked her if she has a joke in this moment? And we're all trying to think of something funny and we can't come up with it. And I'm like, hey, sound girl, you got anything? And she's like, I don't know. I was thinking this. And then that ends up being the thing that kills. That to me is like, I love to be surprised by people. So I think that's why I subconsciously keep my expectations kind of low. And because most people don't impress you, honestly. In most scenarios, you call on someone, you're like, yeah, what do you think? And they're like, I don't, you're like, next time. And you keep going. And that was their chance. And they weren't ready. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But the moment when they're like, boom, contribution or thought. And I'm like, look at this fucking kid. What are you, 23? It's amazing. Look, and he made the whole day. And then later you're going to get to watch this on TV. Good for you. Like, I get excited about that. And I worry if I think too much of people, I'll enjoy those moments less because it's a nice surprise when I'm like, look at the big brain on Brett. You know, I'm like, this is fun. I didn't think you knew anything. And here you knew, you're like, yeah, there you go. And I think that's what kind of is at the core of what you're saying too, which is like, just leave everybody room to not be a non-player character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let them be the hero in their own story and just try not to get in the way of that as you're the hero.
Well, and I can hold two truths in my, like, you got to hold two truths in your mind at the same time.
Right.
And by this, I mean, one of my next tattoo that I've been meaning to get for a while is the quote from Midsummer Night's Dream, which is Puck when he's like, "Lord, what fools these mortals be."
Sure.
Which is like, I'm very positive on humans. I like humans. I do. I like many humans. I like most humans. And also we're idiots.
We're dumb.
Like
super dumb.
Like super dumb in so many ways. Or one of the things that I talk about it is that a lot of it's just where each of us puts our focus.
Right.
In that, like, a lot of times, you know, take you and I have had this conversation. Like, you know, a mechanic, somebody who works on a car and understands the basics of a car, and then looks at all these people driving their car, not treating it right or not doing like an oil change or basic stuff, and they're like, "What a bunch of fucking idiots!" Like, right. What a bunch of dumbasses that don't understand this basic thing. And it's like, just because you don't understand that one thing doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you haven't put your focus on that ever. Right. You know, and you can have somebody could be incredibly smart, and then in certain or many things, they look like an idiot because they've never actually really focused on that thing. Yeah. And so giving a lot of leeway to, like, just because somebody does something stupid doesn't mean they're stupid.
I say it to my wife all the time. She'll be like, "Why did you do that? Like, what happened?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm a dumb guy who's dumb. And so I did this dumb thing, and I'm sorry." But I know. I think of it like this. It's so funny that you mentioned D&D earlier, and we should probably wrap up. But I think I haven't played a lot of D&D, but I play a lot of fucking RPG video games, which basically work the same way, where you like allocate statistic points on certain attributes, or if anyone's played The Sims, you try to like build a skill level up. I feel like I think about that in life all the time. And it's so funny when you meet someone, because you're like, they literally have a 10 in like cooking. And they make stuff and they can like do this crazy stuff. And then they try to talk to a person and they've not spent any time developing that skill. That's at a 1. And this other thing's at a 10. And you definitely shouldn't assume, you know, and I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, we all just have so many statistical points to allocate. You just can't. Tony Stark is not good at dealing with people, but he's Iron Man. And he's Tony Stark. Bruce Wayne's like, fuck Bruce Wayne. What's he? He's nobody. Fucking Tony Stark is his own superhero. And then he's also fucking Iron Man. It's amazing. But then he tries to like get handed something and he's like, trauma from my childhood. And like, he's like, you can't be handed a thing. That's a stupid problem for Iron Man to have. But he only has so many allocation points, man.
Well, and to tie it back to what we were talking about, of assuming everybody has something to teach you, part of me goes like, wonder what this person put their stats in. Wonder what they've got their points in. You know what I mean? Yeah. And maybe after a while you learn nothing. They don't have a lot of stats. It's possible, but I assume that they put their stats into something. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, like in a conversation with people like that, I feel like you've got like a metal detector where you're like sweeping over conversation topics until you see their eyes light up, and it's like, oh, this person likes sewing. Let's talk about sewing. You know what I mean? And then like, if you get somebody, I tell you this, if you get someone on their favorite fucking topic, guarantee they can probably teach you something. Doesn't mean it's something you need to know.
You know who knew that better than anybody? And we'll close it out with this. You know who was the all-time greatest at that shit?
Who?
Matt Bullock.
Yeah.
Matt Bullock, the acting teacher at School of the Arts, rest in peace. One of my favorite people of all time, and definitely one of my favorite teachers. Matt knew everything. He like whatever weird thing you were into, he could at least name drop enough things, no matter how obscure it was, that he would connect with you about it. And you'd be like, yeah, right. How do you know that? And he's like, it's pretty good, man. I've seen it. I've seen it. And you're like, nobody's seen it. He's like, I've fucking seen it, man. And you're like, how do you've read every book. You'd be like, there was no random obscure thing, it would be like, he goes, you'd be like, he's too old for this. There's no way he knows it. And he'd be like, man, Order of the Phoenix, best Harry Potter book. It's the best one. And you're like, where the fuck did you read Order of the Phoenix? He's like, I'm just saying, man, if you're gonna read it, I know it's the thickest, but it's worth the time. And you're like, okay, never mind. This is fucking crazy. It was as if he read that same fact at some point and was like, always find the thing that connects you with that other person. It curries favor with them instantly. And it's not, the thing that was great about Matt is that even though he had the motivation to be a good teacher and to give us a good education, so that was what he wanted out of the relationship, was to try to help. He genuinely wanted to see you light up when he said the thing that no one else knew, and to give you that wink, like, that thing you're into that's weird, I think it's cool, man. And you'd be like, wow, I guess I'm not alone. And I think you give that to people, dude. Even if you're not able to always connect with every single thing, I think the way you talk to people gives them that 100%. And I would be terrified if anyone were to ever run against you for political office. I would be very worried for them.
I think that I'm fascinated by politics, but I also like politics require a level of hypocrisy. Genuinely, I feel like that's just really hard to swallow.
My role forever will be that of the Bill Maher side clown. I don't ever want the responsibility of representing any people in a democracy. I can't imagine a group of people thinking I'm going to be their best representative. I just don't think a group of people lives even all in the same place. So that would be a problem. And I'm much better at making fun of the people who try to do that job. But you'd be great at it, man. You'd be great at it in a way that I could never be. And even if that, the specific like American politics realm is not where you end up, I think any organization would be blessed to have you as its leader, because most people who seek out power in that way, I don't think come from the place that you do. And maybe that's why you're not currently a cult leader, despite the fact that you would be tremendously good at it.
It's an ongoing joke with my friend circle. Is they're like, or some of them are like, you run your own cult. I'm like, no, I don't. And they're like, you kind of do. I'm like, I don't.
It's like, you guys just haven't done any crazy shit yet. That's the only difference. You haven't done anything yet worth making a documentary about. And when you do, it'll be like D&D cult leader Brandon Harris. Man.
Rainey is obsessed with cults, so we've been watching a lot of cult documentaries.
You seen the NXIVM stuff?
Oh yeah. Oh, we've talked about it at like so much. I only recently watched the documentary on Jonestown. That shit is so haunting. Yeah, that is like giving me nightmares. I'd always heard the thing, drinking the Kool-Aid and all that other shit, but right. I didn't know what was really going on. An interesting way to close this thing.
Yeah, I was trying to make it a positive, like Matt Bullock thing. Just like Jonestown Massacre. How about that?
Spike it right down into the center.
Spike it is a really good way to articulate that. Did you mean to do that?
Nope.
That was good. That was awesome. It was really smooth the way I drew attention to it. Okay. Thank you for doing the show. You have to come back, please. And we'll talk more about all of the things that we didn't talk about today. And I'll listen to that other episode and maybe we'll post that.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be on the show.
Thanks, man. All 70 people who listen to it are going to love this. And thank you for those who made it to the end, both of you. Bye.
Bye.